KID crew, welcome to the September edition of Table Talk on this Patriots Day. We are reflecting on 24 years ago today, remembering the heroes and the lessons from that tragic day. We're also going to do our best to connect the dots between what happened 24 years ago and the events of the last 24 hours. So we certainly have a lot to talk about today. Let's get right down to the business of meeting our incredible panel. But before we do, let me give a shout out to Gandolfo's for providing our delicious lunch, and then to Classic Interiors for powering these table talk conversations each and every month. Go in and visit them. They have beautiful tables that will be perfect for you to gather your friends and family and have important conversations. All right, so let's meet today's incredible panel.
Jolyn, hi, I'm Trisha Drake. This year I am the president of the Idaho Falls Exchange Club. Our mission there is community and Americanism, bringing together our community surrounding veterans, first responders, and law enforcement.
Hi, Jolyn. I'm Kate Long. I'm with Club Apple. I also serve on the board of directors for the Greater Idaho Falls Chamber of Commerce.
Good afternoon. I'm Robert Kohler. I work for the Madison Fire Department. I currently serve as their emergency manager, and I've been there 22 years.
I'm Stan Crittenden with the Madison Fire Department. I'm their fire inspector and been with them for 27 years.
All right. So a lot has been going on the past 24 hours. So we're going to start because I don't want to overlook what today is and reflecting and remembering that tragic event. And one of the things I want to focus on is what happened September 12th and that unity, that patriotism that we saw. So I want to give each of you the opportunity to maybe just share something that has really stood out to you over the years about September 11th, 2001 and September 12th, 2001. And we'll start with you, Stan.
September 11th, 2001, I wasn't even in the, I was in the profession, but just as a volunteer. So it was a different feeling, different outlook. I was just a regular citizen at that point, doing my regular job, and it was a humbling time to look at the devastation, what it did to everybody, what it did to the communities, but it was very rewarding the day after to see how everybody started to come together with it.
And go ahead right there, Robert.
For me, I was overseas during 9/11 in 2001. I was actually in Northern Europe and visiting some friends in a small little town called Cherbourg, Denmark, and to watch as the Danish people surrounded any Americans they found with love and care and kindness, it screamed September 12th and what we really want to remember now. And so my memories are of somebody reaching out that wasn't even affected, a country that wasn't even affected, but knew people were and showed extreme kindness.
And Kate, how about you?
I remember September 11th just feeling a lot of uncertainty and confusion that day. Obviously, there was so much fear and whatnot, but again, September 12th, it was just a sense of like unity and people caring, being a little bit nicer, a little more gentle, and a little kinder that day. There was definitely something about that day that I'll just never forget, the way people for a while were a lot gentler with one another.
And Trisha.
What everybody on the panel has said really resonates with me. I feel the same exact way. Dealing with the uncertainty of what had happened that day, having a brother-in-law in the city, not being able to get a hold of him, having no idea really what was going on, and just, that fear. And then, towards the end of the evening, hearing just more stories and accounts and finally getting a hold of him and being okay that way. But then, as Kate said, with September 12th, it's just the unity and people coming together and being there for each other in a better way than just, how can I say this? over social media, right? We talked about how there really wasn't that back then. And so on September 12th, we came together physically as communities to support each other. And I feel that maybe there's a turn of events and things will start to get back to that point, which would be totally amazing. And I think it would be a culmination of, a lot of people's efforts from then until now to have that happen.
KID crew, as we were having lunch, we were discussing how different it was 24 years ago, the way that we got our information versus the way that we have been getting information the past 24 hours. And because we didn't just rely on that social media network of friends, as people like to say, we reached out to our communities and we relied on each other in a much more personal way. One of the things that I have always thought about in terms of 9/11 is that while there were so many people running away from that danger, our heroes were running for it. And recently I had the chance to have Kevin Calhoun from the FDNY and Tim Brown from FDNY. Both of them were working on that fateful day 24 years ago. And the thing that really struck me is that they made it clear that those heroes knew that there was a really good chance that they wouldn't be coming back. And they basically said their goodbyes and kind of knew that. And that really hit me hard. And I think that knowledge really gives us so much motivation to recommit ourselves to that idea of never forgetting that sacrifice. And I think that the way we can sort of connect the dots a little bit is that those heroes were fighting for freedom. Our way of life came under attack in a really brutal way. Our enemies hated everything that America stands for, and they were determined to destroy that. And ironically, yesterday, we watched an assassination. And from everything we're able to gather, that assassination happened to someone who has been described as a soldier of truth, someone who encouraged dialogue and conversation and getting back to that, and was taken out for no other reason. And so it's kind of ironic as you think about 24 years ago, the fight to preserve those freedoms, and now we watched as someone was brutally, in cold blood, assassinated for what they believe. So we're going to kind of get down to this. I talked yesterday a lot about the fact that we can't legislate our way out of this. All the laws in the land are not worth the paper they're written on unless and until there is that mighty change of heart. And earlier today, I was chatting with Don Jarrett from our sister station, The Wolf Wake Up Call, and he's also our operations manager here. And he and I were having a really good conversation. And so what it comes down to is that what we're dealing with is really a tale as old as time. It is the battle between good and evil. And we have really seen that come full circle. And when evil happens, we want to explain it away. So as you think about that battle between good and evil, what comes to your mind?
I think for me, it's realizing that this is the world that we live in now. And before we were on the panel, we were at lunch talking about this a little bit and how different the world is. And sometimes I live in a world of rainbows and unicorns, right? I have my little bubble that I live in, the people that I talk to, the people that I deal with, and I love that. But then there's that part of me that's like, it's not always like that. You know, someone woke up this morning, without their husband, and their kids no longer have a father that's alive, and when that just slams its face, slams you right in the face, that's very difficult to deal with. And sometimes I have a hard time fathoming what that really feels like, how the evil comes into that space.
Right.
Especially with him. You mentioned, all he wanted was free speech.
Yes.
He was a debater. He was so respectful to everyone's views, maybe trying to change their mind, but really maybe just trying to let them see someone else's perspective, and allow that. And he was an innocent.
Yes.
And that's very hard, especially when you have someone that could do such an evil act to such an innocent person. That's the dichotomy I'm just struggling with. It's very hard.
It's hard to wrap your mind around it. And as you say that, Tricia, I saw online today Charlie Kirk's wife talking, and I didn't even really see, it was a quick reel when it was from, but she said, "My husband, Charlie Kirk, was a force." And that really just hit me. And then I saw pictures of him with his sweet babies, and I had the same reaction. Their world has been destroyed. Kate, how about you?
I think, and this is something we touched upon earlier too, I think we've got to find a place where we remember what makes us alike and
Yes.
what brings us together, and, get back to a place of like respect, even if we have different points of view. Because things like this, we are living in such a polarized time, and we are not everybody, not the people here, but so much of the world is just focusing on the things that they dislike about other people, and they're not looking at like the things that they love about it. There's such a beautiful thing about the human connection, when you see people come together, and even if they don't know each other, to try to do something good in this world, or even as small as like holding a door open, we are losing those things, those kindnesses, and I think we've got to start day by day, opportunity after opportunity, finding ways to implement those kindnesses back into our everyday lives, and start looking about what connects us versus what separates us.
You're right on point, and I can't help but think about all the people that we're hearing stories about who just somehow believe that AI can replace human connection. I think we have got to really lift our voices up and champion that human connection. Robert, how about you?
I really like what you said, the human connection, and I think that sums up September 12th
Yes.
because it was all about human connection. Earlier this year, I was out on a wildfire assignment down in southern Utah, and it was during the same time as a tragedy up in Coeur d'Alene. And a neighbor, they put down their phone and came and knocked on the door to check on my wife. They knew I was gone. They didn't know where I was at. I was nowhere close to it. But that human connection that they would put down their phone, walk, however many steps it is, and actually pound on the door until my wife answers and said, "Are you guys okay?" That's what happened with September 12th. Everybody turned to each other and said, "Are you okay? You weren't involved in this, but are you okay? Are you okay?" And as a nation, we circled our wagon, so to speak, to say we are going to take care of ourselves. And that's the steps I think we need to take as a nation, to say we need to ask each other, "Are you okay?" and move forward with it.
Robert, what a beautiful story. And it really highlights the fact that the little things make a big difference. And we've got to reclaim some of those things that were more common once upon a time. Stan, what's going through your mind as you consider all of this?
I keep going back to we call it the brotherhood at the fire department. I've educated my kids that if you're ever out and about, you can go and you're in trouble, you go to the fire department. You explain to them that your dad is a fireman and you need help, and you will get help. We need to get that back as individuals, as neighbors, as communities, that if my neighbor needs help, I'll drop anything. I'll go help them. I'll get them through it. I'll pick them up and bring them back into it. And that's where we need to get as a world, as a nation, is back on that September 12th, where we had each other's backs, that will bring each other back home again.
We really did. And Stan, as you're talking about that, it reminds me that during that time, the little petty disagreements didn't seem to matter. We prioritized on September 12th what mattered most. Those disagreements were still there, but we didn't focus our energy on those. And I think that's a lesson that we could perhaps really use right now as we strive to wrap our mind around this tragedy. So when you hear the battle between good and evil, what do you think we can do to make sure that the light is more powerful than the darkness?
I think it just goes back to trying to communicate with each other. We've lost that skill. I think part of that is due to like social media and how we're inundated, and people will say and do whatever they can to get more attention without repercussion. And I think we've got to find ways to connect with one another and have these hard conversations and see what it is that is like this nation's worth fighting for. It doesn't matter which side you're on. We're one nation, and we all have so much in common. And to be so divided right now it's so sad, and it's not what our ancestors have fought for generations.
No.
I feel like, reflecting over the past couple of days, what's been going on. This morning, I just had a thought pop into my head that nothing beautiful is ever really destroyed. And even our nation, right? The buildings might be down, right? The towers are gone, but what is in the place of that? Memories of the people who were there, the good memories, right? The lights that they shine up in the air. It's such a beacon of hope for so many people. And, the thing might not be there anymore, right? But the legacy that lives on, and the hope, right, that people might have to move on, to live another day, to do their very best. And I think what Kate was saying is so important. It's disheartening to see how many people feel disconnected. So many studies are out there. I can't even name one, but if you just Google it, all of the studies that have been done about especially COVID, right? And people are so lonely and they missed the connection. And how can we get back to that point, right? The September 12th, how can we get back to that? What as a community can we do to bring people together, to make sure that history does not keep repeating itself, right? Learn from what happened, learn from the good, learn from the bad, and take the good and make it so much better. The organization that I'm with, the Exchange Club, we're responsible for the Field of Honor every Memorial Day, which is just an amazing sight. We have over 1,000 flags that we set up in Freeman Park. Now, that in itself is a sight, but almost every flag has a tag on it, and the tag is a memorial to someone who served in the military, law enforcement, first responders, anything like that. And to see people be excited, to see the tag on the flag, and what it represents to them, I think. And we had more people at this past Memorial Day than we've ever had before come, and we're a club, so people join, and we had more people join over that 3-day weekend than ever before. The patriotism was there, the love of America was there, and to me, that is something that we can just build on. And the thing is how do we get everybody else thinking that same way and knowing that every single person has something to contribute? How do we get to that point?
It's so true. And, the Surgeon General actually has declared a loneliness epidemic. And so you hear people saying, oh, I have 10,000 friends, but they've probably never even met half of them or more than half of them face to face. So I think it's conversations like this gathering around a table and having conversations. People have gotten so busy multitasking that we're almost just losing that connection and seeing it as an inconvenience rather than the beautiful thing that it really is. Robert and Stan, you guys tend to see people on some of the worst days of their lives. What have you learned from that experience of being there in the midst of tragedy with people?
You know, what comes to mind after what we've just been discussing is a lesson that a paramedic program instructor taught me 20 years ago. He says, you will take care of a variety of people out there, some that are great to work with, some that aren't. But for good patient care, you need to remember that it's somebody's mom, it's somebody's dad, it's somebody's grandma, grandpa, brother, sister, aunt, and uncle. They're important to somebody. And what he was driving home is that's a person there you're taking care of. And I think as we look out into the community, if we could share that same mindset to say, that's somebody's mom or dad right there. I may not agree with the things they say, but it doesn't mean I have to do anything against them. I can cherish them for who they are and what they are. And that's pretty big in our society, I think.
There's a lot I learned it pretty quick, like Robert did, that everybody we run on gets treated as family. The way I want my family members to be taken care of if something happens to them. And there's some of the individuals that we get called out to that are, like you said, they're having the worst day of their lives. And so it's very rewarding to me to be asked to be the one that goes, that needs, that you get out there. It could be a hug. It could be, yes, I understand. Let's just go sit down and talk for a little bit. It could be, cutting them out of the car wreck, whatever it is. But in the end, there's no greater feeling than to know that another human being relied on you to keep them here in this world.
The power of stories.
Oh, yeah.
And I love hearing those stories. Last night, Turning Point USA's Rexburg chapter held a memorial for Charlie Kirk, and I finished up the show and headed up there, and it was an impressive crowd. And the night was full of really emotional tributes. And as you were talking about just knowing that you're not alone, it was interesting that a lot of the people from the crowd who came up to speak talked about how Charlie Kirk had given them the courage to be who they are, to stand for what they believe, and to be a little bolder. And they talked about how they felt a little less alone as they watched him have the courage to move forward with faith. And it was really powerful to be able to hear people just coming from the crowd, one by one, up to share their experiences.
Yeah, he was an amazing person. I know, what I said earlier about, his legacy will live on, right? He has 2 small children, unfortunately, that probably didn't really know him, but will understand who he was through the power, a good power, I think, of social media, right? All the videos that he did, his podcast, his radio show, and I feel like that's something that will live on. But he was killed for what he believes. And to have that kind of conviction, knowing that it's a possibility, is something that I admire. When it comes to your, when it knocks on your door, right? Do you have the fortitude to do what he did? And I feel like if we all had that, but in Charlie's way, where we were all accepting of one another's views, knowing that we're all not alike. Everyone has different beliefs, but we can all coexist because we've done it before.
Yeah, talk about courage. And one thing that really hit me is you see the images of him as he's preparing for that. And he's doing what he loves, and he's full of life. And it's so heartbreaking to realize that hate resulted in his tragic death. And I think I've had people say, well, why is he getting so much attention? Every tragedy matters, it does. But I think one of the things here is that this is the first assassination that we've had in a long, long time. You've got, the two Kennedys, you've got Dr. Martin Luther King, and now you've got Charlie Kirk. So those date back to the 60s, and now we watched as a single bullet aimed with hate at one person. It was a different feeling than a mass shooting where it's somebody just looking to wreak havoc and death and destruction. It was one person aiming a weapon and looking to take out somebody for what they believed.
As we discuss this, the thing that comes to my mind is, yes, that weapon was loud, and it has a lasting impact, a very devastating impact. But it seems, as you experienced in Rexburg last night, that Charlie Kirk's voice is louder than the weapon.
So
And
true.
I think that's important to remember, too, that his positive influence, no matter what side you're on, he had a positive influence for people. And his positive influence is much louder than the gunshot. And it will continue to ring long after that gunshot is silenced.
I love that. And Robert, that was one of the common themes that people said last night. They said, Charlie Kirk's voice has not been silenced. We will carry on that legacy.
Well, I think it's something that we as individuals can seek for too. Get our voice to be that voice heard, but also be that one that listens to the other voice. Quit trying to conquer the individual you're listening to and find out who they are. Find out what they're wanting, what's behind them, what they stand for, that kind of stuff.
And I think because we also lost Melissa Hortman and her husband.
Yes.
That was in June, I believe.
That was heartbreaking.
That was heartbreaking. I think and I'm not diminishing their loss. That was absolutely tragic. But we experienced this in real time. This was something that I shared this with you guys earlier. I didn't know what had happened. And I just happened to flip onto social media, and I did not know what I was watching. And it was the video of him being shot, and I was so discombobulated for a moment, trying to process what had happened and trying to figure out what I was watching. And we are a country that believes in free speech, right? If you don't agree with me, it's okay. It's my, I have the privilege to say what I want to say, and you have the privilege to disagree with me. And he was very open about staying with his convictions and letting people share their own convictions. And that's something if we're going to take anything away from this, we've got to keep having these open dialogues with people, and we've got to start, just continue, speak our minds, speak our hearts, speak our souls, and hopefully find a way to sow a little love into the words.
Yes.
I love that. I'm not sure I can follow that. Sow a little love into the words. I absolutely love that.
Words are powerful, and the truth is we can use them to build or destroy. And I think this is an opportunity for us to focus on how we can use the power of words to build people up and to bridge the gaps that separate us right now.
Yeah. I was thinking, what our country was built on. Going back, into Philadelphia, they're in that room, and can you imagine the debates that they had, right? We're, mutinizing against a country that we came from, and we're trying to create something new, and all of the differing, viewpoints and the skilled craftsmanship probably, and of those people being able to finally come to a conclusion and say, this is the direction that we're going on, and everybody signed the document. And, again, that spirit of communication and being open to someone else's someone else's perspective and learning from them. That means so much, and that's what our country was founded on. And next year is the 250th anniversary, and very exciting. There's so many celebrations going on.
Yes.
And it will be amazing. And I hope that with the tragedy from yesterday and 9/11 and everything that we've learned, it's a possibility this may be a catalyst for change, to really start sowing love into our words.
A lot of people have been talking about the irony in the fact that Charlie Kirk is the co-founder of Turning Point, and Fox News is Jesse Waters and Greg Gutfeld saying that this, in fact, could be a major turning point for this nation.
It's definitely a time where we as a nation can take a step back and evaluate. I mean, on an individual basis, are we sowing those words of love in? Or are we not quite on the mark? But we can evaluate it and say, well, maybe we can redirect here and actually see people for people.
Lean in with a little curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Other people's opinions aren't contagious, and nobody's going to strong arm us into co-signing on somebody else's ideology. But when we're willing to lean in and learn a little more, there is some really beautiful progress that happens in those moments of just being willing to learn.
One of my favorite things that I love about being a paramedic is interaction with the patients, and getting to know them for who they are, getting their backstory, and having that curiosity like you're talking about when you meet somebody new. Well, where are they from? What are they doing? What makes them who they are? And taking the time to listen, really, and listen to somebody else's story is so enlightening and so rewarding to hear what they've been through, what they've experienced.
And it's those stories that provide a lot of hope and inspiration.
I think when our forefathers wrote that document, they had so much hope.
Yes.
And they hoped for prosperity and peace and growth. And they left it up to interpretation. And it, gets added to and modified, and has for almost 250 years for 250 years. Yeah. And I think that says a lot, meanings and concepts change, and they realized that they would, and they hoped that we would grow and become stronger and have growing pains that we could find a way to negotiate. And I feel that that's where we're at right now. We're going through a growing pain, and we've got to find a way to come back together with some more hope and some more love.
And it's having the courage to face what's really going on, because you think about when tragedy happens, there's that knee-jerk reaction, and it's, we're going to take all the guns, or we're going to do this. And, at the end of the day, guns do not kill people. People kill people. And if they don't have guns, we saw on that subway another horrific tragedy, that beautiful young Ukrainian trying to make her way here in America, just on her way home from work, and it was a vicious knife attack. So that leads us right back to that tale as old as time, the battle between good and evil. And there are, I believe, many more good people, full of light and hope and love and compassion. But we are, and we have been, we're seeing it, I believe, maybe a little more than we did before because of social media, and we are seeing everything in real time. But that's always been there. So how do we confront that battle of good and evil and recognize that there are those out there sowing the seeds of deceit and evil and hatred? And I love that you're saying, let's sow some love. So how do we take some proactive steps to maybe make a difference?
I think it's got to start somewhere. Why not with you? Why not with me? Why not be the one that starts the positive flow. And then listening to Robert, and we run into it all the time up there in Rexburg we have a large campus of very young adults. I'll put it that way. They don't like being called kids anymore. But they still need a parent there when on their worst days. They get in a car wreck, they get, that kind of stuff happens. And we treat them like humans, and their parents appreciate it. So then it starts to flow. The floodgates get opened, and then the parents want to pay it back, or they want to pay it forward. So then they treat somebody nicer, and it's contagious. And I think that's where we got to start. We just got to start down low at our level and push it out.
Ooh, beautiful. Kindness is contagious.
Mm-hmm. I would agree exactly with that. Even starting in our own homes. It's okay to serve your family. It's okay to serve your neighbors. It's okay to say, hey, do you need some help? Raise a helping hand. Tying it back into 9/11, that's what we saw. They raised a helping hand. They didn't care who they were. They didn't care where they came from. They didn't even know them, and they were there feeding them and working with them and just trying to find that little niche to spread a little kindness.
I feel like no one, I would say, in my experience, I don't like to relive tragedies. I'm not sure a lot of people do, but going back to that day and thinking of the next day, and how, if you're my age, right? I was alive, obviously. I remember that day. I remember what I was doing when I heard. I remember almost everything that went on those first couple of days. It kind of sticks in your mind. But everyone in this room would know someone who was personally affected, more than just being an American, someone who knew someone that was there, or knew someone that was a first responder, and has heard firsthand stories of those type of things. And I think starting there and understanding that that's where we were, and September 12th, everyone came together, just like what you just said. Everyone came together and supported their neighbor. And if we can just get back to that, doesn't mean we have to revert, doesn't mean we have to, go backwards or anything like that. We know what we know. And I think grasping onto that, and giving ourselves a little bit of grace, and giving others a little bit of grace. Especially, you probably deal with this so often. We've said people on their worst day, and how they probably need to take a little bit of breath and give themselves a little bit of grace, right? They made a mistake, or something happened. They were in a car accident. It was their fault, whatever it might be. But taking that step back and a big breath. And I feel like if we did that and realized that we're all connected by these major events that happen, we can all use them as a turning point to be better, and to get back to the way that most people would love our nation to be.
Right. Bloom where you're planted, and let your light shine, because as we do that, that light is going to cut through some of that darkness. And there's a lot of division right now, and we already, in the aftermath of this, see people working to further the divide in the midst of all of this. And one thing that I believe has been really refreshing is to see that there have been political leaders from the left stepping up and denouncing this violence, speaking out against it. Maybe they didn't agree at all with Charlie Kirk or his politics, but they saw him as a husband, a father, a patriot, a fellow American, and that is the important fabric for us to really focus on. So I have loved that we have seen these leaders stepping up and offering condolences. And we've also seen the other side of the coin, haven't we? We have seen people cheering the death, or suggesting that Charlie Kirk got what he deserved. And I don't know about you, but that's really hard for me to wrap my mind around, because how do we get to a place where we're so triggered and polarized that we believe that somebody's differing opinion makes them worthy of death? That is frightening.
Yeah, that is terrifying. The fact that you're exactly right. Somebody thought that it would be okay to eliminate him from this world because they didn't agree with him. And we've got to start going back to like letting people talk and express themselves and finding the things that you agree with versus focusing on the bad. And I mean, Dr. Martin Luther King said, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that.
Oh,
And that's what we have got to do. We have got to start looking at the things that make us alike instead of focusing on the things that make us different, because there's always going to be differences. I mean, my goodness, you could have a set of twins and they'll be as different as can be, raised in the same environment by the same, everything would be similar, and they'll be so different, right? So of course we're all going to be different. And, I don't know what people's religious views are. So if you disagree with this, I'm sorry, but, I've always thought that man was created in God's image. And if you look just at this table, we're so vastly different. So look at how multifaceted the creator must be. So how could you look at another person knowing that they are also created by the same loving God and think they don't deserve to be here?
And that they're a child of God. And that was another thing that was really focused on last night in Rexburg, was the fact that Charlie Kirk knew that he was a son of God and had a relationship with Jesus Christ and was bold in his faith and his beliefs. And it's just tragic that there is so much hate, because we all get to think, feel, and believe as we choose. And learning to respect one another and agree to disagree is a big part of it.
Well, and I think that faith can help us focus. To go back to what you said, we can either focus on these negative comments and give them the attention they're seeking, or pull back and say we're going to focus on the good. And Charlie used his faith to focus on good things. And that's a lesson we can learn from him, to say, okay, I'm going to focus on good. I may hear this, doesn't mean I have to engage in it. I can move on and focus on good things.
That's a really, really good point. And I think that one of the positive things, too, is that we're seeing that as people are cheering or celebrating, they are being called out by other people. I'm not sure if you heard this, but MSNBC has just fired Matthew Dowd, a commentator there, because in his coverage of Charlie Kirk's assassination, he suggested, and I'm not going to try to quote it, but he suggested that Charlie Kirk's hateful rhetoric led to his own assassination. And so the network was quick to say, wait a second, no, that is inappropriate. There is no room for violence like that in our system, no matter what your political ideology is. And so I think that that's a positive sign to see that MSNBC, we know that they are very far from where Charlie Kirk was politically, but the fact that they could recognize that, hey, wait a second, we cannot let that slide. We have to stand up and say, no, we're not going to be encouraging hateful rhetoric against someone who just was utilizing his First Amendment right. As you think about your life experience, is there a story that kind of stands out in your mind that sort of illustrates that battle between good and evil?
Man, that's a hard question.
That's a heavy question.
That is a heavy question. I think living, as you know, I'm 47 now, so I've seen a lot of different things. I've lived in a lot. I grew up in the military. My dad was in the military, so I lived a lot of different places. And so one of the things that isn't exactly an answer to your question, but I remember, you know, at a very young age, in order to adapt to whatever my new environment was going to be, it was to look for the things that you could find similar, right?
Oh, I like that.
So when I would move, how do I make new friends? Okay, let me find another little girl who likes Barbies and loves the color pink and who loves sparkly things and swimming, and focusing on the things that I had in common. And I learned that at a really, really young age, because we were going to be moving again anytime soon, you know, because that's what happens when you're a military brat. And so I don't necessarily know if that's the fight against good and evil, but I always learned at a young age to find things that you have in common with other people. And that's kind of how I've lived the last 47 years.
Kate, I think that's right on point, because as we look at the battle of good and evil, one of the weapons in that battle of good and evil is division and trying to separate us. I often think when we see these really horrible tragedies unfold, I remember particularly thinking it after the Hamas terror attack, thinking, how could other human beings do that to other human beings? And then it hit me like a ton of bricks. They don't see them as human beings. They start dehumanizing their enemies. So I think your idea of looking for what unites us is a really effective tool in that battle between good and evil.
I agree with that 100%. I am very, very passionate about mindset, changing your paradigms, getting better, right? It starts here. It starts with you, changing that about what you see and how you interact with the world. What you focus on increases, right? I mentioned earlier about my rainbows and unicorns. That's what I focus on. I focus on the good in my life, in the people that I meet, and I'm going to see more of that. And I think what happens sometimes is people may focus on the wrong thing and think, oh, there's so much bad in the world. Everything's so bad and it's awful, and that's all they see, because that's what they're attracting, for lack of a better word, right? I mean, because we could sit here and say all the bad things and, you know, everything's horrible and, oh, it's so bad. But yes, there's horrible things, but there are so many good people. And if people could just start to focus on the good in other people, even if it could just be like, you have a really nice colored shirt on today, right? And that's the good that I'm finding today. That's enough. That's enough to create a little bit of a relationship with someone that they can, you know, see you as someone different. Benjamin Franklin he wrote a, let me get at that again. Sorry. Benjamin Franklin, there was a member of the Senate that he didn't really get along with. And he thought, well, I'm going to ask him for a favor, which was totally out of, you know, he didn't know this person. They didn't really get along. And he asked for a book, said, I know you have a copy of this very rare book. I would love to see it. And the man was like, of course, I will give you this book. And he gave it to him, and he returned it a week later after perusing it and you know, feeling the book, I guess, with a nice note that said, thank you so much. And he said after that, the man was much more likely to give him another favor, right? They got along on the Senate floor. They weren't really friends, but they were better acquaintances than they were just 2 weeks prior. And I think that kind of thing can go a long way, right? Asking for help, asking for a favor maybe from someone, and finding that common ground. Right? You have the same likes or dislikes that I do. I have friends that have completely different political views than I do. Now, we just don't talk about it because there's no need to. we talk about what we have in common. We do the things that we like to do, and that perpetuates our friendship. And so I would say Kate, what you said was amazing. Finding those commonalities and the uniqueness of other people that you can be drawn to or be similar with is game changers.
What an example of how we can learn a lot by looking back in history. Robert, how about you?
Well, thank you for giving me some time to think. And I don't recall the full details of the story. I wasn't personally involved in it. But it is something that is running true in my life. And unfortunately, I don't know if I'd be as graceful as this gentleman was. It happened down in Utah, and a drunk driver killed his wife and I believe 2 kids. And the drunk driver was a young man. And as we talk about the difference between good and evil. There's also bad choices. I'm not referring to anything that happened with Charlie Kirk. That's a whole nother thing. But sometimes we as humans make bad choices. And that's what this young man did. He drove drunk and unfortunately resulted in him going to prison for manslaughter. But what the man did that lost his wife and kids is a huge lesson we could learn from today. He didn't belittle, he didn't berate. He expressed his grief to this individual when they met later. And he actually went on and started coaching him in life. The very person that took away so much from him. He showed him kindness and concern for that one individual and actually helped him turn his life around and worked through the difficulties. And the gentleman, I wish I could remember his name so you could look up the story, but he turned that young man's life from a disaster that they both shared, and it could have divided them. And they looked for common ground and they built together. They focused on building good things together. I would hope I would have that type of mentality should a disaster like that happen. But that really screams of that person, that man embodied everything good in our nation.
Yes.
Everything good, everything we talk about with September 12th, everything we hope we would be as people, he did. And it's something we can learn from.
Wow. I am so moved by that. And forgiveness is a really powerful tool.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can try to see each other with a little bit more grace. So I love that you brought up that sometimes it's a bad decision, and that doesn't necessarily define somebody's entire life story.
Yeah, their entire existence.
Right. Stan.
As I've been sitting here listening and contemplating being in the industry I'm in, it's very black. It's very dark most days. Yes, we get to come out victorious every once in a while with a good save, a good rescue, whatever it is. But I think it all boils down to the individual. You've got to we have to learn how to be able to say, okay, I need to break. I need to step back. I need to regroup, and I need to come at it positive. I need to figure out how I can accept what is going on and come out positive on top of it. Then you take that into your day-to-day, meetings with other individuals, and you can, yes, this individual's having a bad day. Okay, I need to step back, let him have a little bit of space, let them have some time to cool off, to regroup, whatever it is, before we start judging, before we start acting and punishing them just because they're struggling that day. And I think it all boils down to understanding the individuals, looking for the common grounds in them, and then letting them be the person that they are and want to be, that they might not be able to right now.
Very, very powerful stuff. You've all just had some really great things to a pretty tough question, but you've nailed it. And one thing that I want to hit on, Stan, is that sometimes we do have to take a step back. Don't you think that, given the fact we're bombarded 24/7 with information and opinions and comparison, that sometimes I think people are walking around with a lot on their shoulders, and it doesn't take much for them to be triggered. If we can maybe set the device down for a minute, it's what you said, Tricia, that mindful place. Go to that mindset that's going to serve us well. That's really, really important. and being able to look at people with a little more grace. I think that's key in all of this, because society right now is kind of rushed to judgment. And the truth is, there's always more to every story than meets the eye, and you've all done a good job of kind of illustrating that fact. You can't give a book report on somebody's life when you have missing pages, missing chapters. And the truth is that we can all be part of lifting and strengthening each other.
I think we've become a very reactive society. So, wait, both of you guys mentioned take a step back, pause, think about. And I think that's another thing that possibly would be such an easy thing to do, but isn't